Great seeing you here again. My name is Rudy Koster, founder of the Koster Academy. And in this video, we're talking about the PMBOK 7th edition. We introduced the PMBOK. We're looking at the performance domains. And now we are going to consider the delivery performance domain, in which we will look at delivery and value, the requirements, scope definition, and moving targets of completion. But before we continue, don't forget to click on the subscribe button, click on the bell button, and every time we have a new video, YouTube will inform you about it. Let's have a look at delivery and value. When we look at projects that are executed in a deterministic approach, they only generate value after the project has been completed or after deployment. When we look at incremental, iterative, and adaptive projects, they deliver value over the different stages of the project lifecycle. So the value is created together with the increments or the iterations. Value delivery is typically continued after the completion of the project, and this is considered in the business case. Now, when we look at the construction project, we construct an infrastructure, for example, a shopping center or a station. There is, in fact, a different way to get value. The construction value, the construction company who is building the project, who is building the infrastructure, will get the value will be paid over time according to the contractual agreement. Now, when we look at the customer for whom we built the infrastructure, for example, that shopping center, the value will be created after the completion of the project. We start getting money in, there are cash flows that are coming in, and the value is in fact, or the profit is generated here, and the business case states this has an assumption of how much revenue we will have over time, and we can also evaluate what the value of the project will be. Now, when we look at the deliverables and the requirements, the deliverables are basically the interim or final product, service, or result and enable the outcomes of the project for which it was created. When we deliver, for example, data service, that deliverable is a part of the final product. It's or service in that case, it's more a service, the data delivery, and it provides us with the means to exchange data. When we have a, let's say, wide area network project, the final deliverable is the completed network, and it is then, that part is in fact the final deliverable of the project, where all the sites of a company, for example, are connected to each other and they can exchange data. Requirements, they're a little bit different. They refer to a condition or capability that should be present in the result to ensure the intended outcome. When we look at the wide area network, the requirement was to connect the different data sites with each other or with the central site, and that we have to have a certain capacity in the data transmission. How many megabits per second we can send from one part of the network to the central part, or what data we can send between the different elements of that network. When we look at a predictive cycle, these are characterized by stable requirements. They are defined at the beginning of the project. When we have adaptive approaches, the requirements may change, evolve, or we can even add requirements during the project execution. So these are the different elements. We looked at the deliverables, the requirements, and how they are treated differently in a predictive and an adaptive cycle. We also talk about requirements elicitation. Elicitation refers to collecting requirements and the different methods to do this. We have different criteria we have to follow. First of all, they have to be clear. The requirement should be clearly expressed, and there should not be any misinterpretation possible. Think about smart words. Concise. We have to make the description as short as possible, but clear. Everything should be contained in the description, but nothing more. A clear, concise, short description. Verifiable. We have to be able to verify the requirements to see that they have been completed. They have to be consistent, typically no contradictory requirements. They have to be complete. They represent the entirety of project or product needs, and they should be traceable. We have to give them unique identifiers so we can find them back easily. When we have evolving and the requirements and we are discovering requirements, we have to look at the different cycles. When we look at an iterative, incremental, and adaptive project cycle, here we find evolving requirements. And it's also possible to discover new requirements during the execution of the project. When different intermediate solutions are represented, the initially defined requirements may evolve and may be adjusted. We implement something new, and based on that, we can define or change the requirements that we had done before. When we also have the iterative, incremental, and adaptive approaches, we understand that evolving requirements are a common phenomenon and they're part of the success formula of these methods. We have to manage requirements. We have to do that in whatever development approach that we have selected, and it's imperative that the requirements are documented and managed properly. We have to keep a record of what is happening. We have to know why they were changed, who changed them, because later people may ask us questions why we changed some requirements and who asked for those changes. It's very important to have that data available. There should be a person in every project who will be accountable for the requirement management, and there should be a register containing all relevant information related to requirements. Bad management, well, like everywhere, in this case, it will lead to rework. We may have scope creep, budget overruns, delivery and scope decomposition. The main document to elaborate on the scope is the scope statement and the identification of the major deliverables. The scope statement contains all the work that has to be done, and it also has an overview of what those major deliverables are. In a deterministic approach, the scope is decomposed using a technique called decomposition, which creates the work breakdown structure. The work breakdown structure is composed of different levels, and every level is providing more details about the project. When we look at other environments, here we find the scope decomposition by making or identifying teams. We also talk about epics, roadmaps, user stories, and other applicable methods that have been developed in the different methodologies. When we look at the delivery and the completion of deliverables, we have different ways to define the completion of a component of the project. We look at the acceptance or completion criteria. Here we have a set of criteria that the deliverable should comply with before the deliverable can be accepted. There are technical performance measures. We can add those additional elements to the work breakdown structure. We call that the WBS dictionary, where we find additional information about the different work breakdown structure items. There is also the definition of done. The definition of done is typically used in adaptive approaches and in many software projects. The definition of done is basically a checklist containing all the criteria that have to be completed before acceptance. So the definition of done can be defined for parts or on the complete project. When we look at delivery and moving targets of completion, When we have projects in a rapidly evolving and uncertain environment, where we can find situations where the good enough to release or done goals may change. We may have to adjust to the circumstances, and we have to deal with that. We also have to look at market changes. We have to monitor them continuously, and when we see that there are important changes, we may apply updates to the project in order to remain competitive. We will see what the market needs, and we can adjust our project, our, let's say, deliverables, requirements to the actual market situation. We see that the DoD is changing constantly or can change constantly. We have to track process by comparing the planned rate of completion with the actual rate of progress. So we have to see how did we plan the progress and what is the actual progress at a certain moment in the project. When we look at the definition of done drift, when we look at the moving targets of completion, let's consider the development of a new product with an initial schedule of 10 periods. For example, 10 sprints. In periods 5 and 11, new features are added, which lead to an extension of the schedule with the time needed to integrate the new features. Now, when we look at the initial schedule, we have those 10 periods that we originally considered, and we see at period 5 we identified new features. They will be added, and we see in order to integrate those new features, we have to extend the project with 3 periods up to period 13. And this is at this moment, with the first update, what we call the done drift. We have the second update where we add the new features at period 11. And what we see now, it takes 2 extra periods to complete the project. And we see that the done drift now is about 5 periods. We expanded the project or delayed the project completion with in total 5 periods. After update 1, we have a done drift of 3 periods. And after update 2, the total done drift is 5 periods. So that was it. Don't forget to click on the subscribe button, click on the bell button. And every time we have a new video, YouTube will inform you about it. Thank you very much, and I'm looking forward to seeing you again in our next videos. Bye bye.